Russia could strike NATO territories any day now. British retirees are drowning in poverty while living in mansions. Police forces are systematically targeting people based on skin color, and the government is teaching citizens pretty words instead of taking real action. If you thought the world was holding steady, think again. This is what we're diving into today. I spent years inside one of the biggest, most recognizable media organizations you know, watched firsthand how they bent stories to fit whatever narrative they needed, and I made a choice. I walked out. Now I work for no one but myself and you. I say what needs to be said, and I show you what actually matters behind the headlines. And listen, if what you're hearing right now resonates with you, if you want to keep getting this kind of straight talk without the corporate filter, do me a favor, hit that like button, smash subscribe, because that's how we keep this independent voice alive. And if you really believe in what we're building here, if you want to be part of something that refuses to bend the knee, consider becoming a channel sponsor. It's personal for me. Every single one of you who steps up means we can dig deeper, go harder, and never back down. Now let's get into it. Several major British newspapers are quoting German Lieutenant General Alexander Solfrank today, and what he's saying should make everyone sit up and pay attention. According to Solfrank, Russia has the military capability to launch a limited strike against NATO as early as tomorrow if Moscow decides that's what it wants to do. Let me say that again. Tomorrow. Not next year, not in some distant future. Tomorrow. Now, Solfrank is being specific here. He's talking about a small, fast regional operation because Russia's main forces are obviously tied up in Ukraine right now. But here's where it gets more concerning. He's not ruling out a much larger offensive by 2029 once Russia completes its military modernization and rearmament. Think about that timeline. We're talking about a few years, not decades. The general pointed out something crucial. Yes, Russian ground forces are taking losses in Ukraine, that's documented, but their air force, their nuclear capabilities, their missile systems, those remain fully operational and combat ready. And Moscow isn't slowing down. They're planning to expand their military to 1.5 million soldiers. That's not a defensive posture, folks. That's preparation. And here's the kicker. Solfrank emphasized that whether Russia actually launches an attack depends on two things: how the West behaves and how effective NATO's deterrence system really is. In other words, this isn't just about Russian intentions. It's about whether we're showing enough strength to make them think twice. Are we? That's the question hanging over Europe right now, and it's a question nobody seems eager to answer clearly. Meanwhile, the Kremlin is busy doing damage control on a different front. British papers are reporting today that Moscow is denying any rift between President Vladimir Putin and Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov. Why would they need to deny this? Because apparently there are rumors flying around about disagreements after a planned summit with President Trump got cancelled. Notice something here? When you have to publicly deny that your president and foreign minister are at each other's throats, that usually means someone's worried about appearances. The meeting was supposed to happen in Budapest, but it got postponed, and the press is suggesting Lavrov took too hard a line on Ukraine during negotiations with U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio. Kremlin Press Secretary Dmitry Peskov came out and said the speculation about a split doesn't match reality. Sure, but here's what matters more than palace intrigue. Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban is heading to the White House this Friday to try to restart talks about that summit and to discuss getting Hungary relief from U.S. sanctions on Russian oil. That's what the British press is actually concerned about today, particularly the Metro newspaper. This isn't just gossip. This is about Hungary potentially creating cracks in the Western sanctions wall, and that has implications for everyone. Now, shifting gears but staying in the Russia conversation, the newspaper is running a feature on Maria Alyokina, the Pussy Riot activist who escaped Russia back in 2022, disguised as a food delivery courier. She's describing horrific conditions in Russian detention facilities for political prisoners, and I want you to hear this because it matters. At Colony K 28 in the Ural region, where she served time, temperatures dropped to negative 35 degrees Celsius. That's negative 31 Fahrenheit, for those of us thinking in American terms. Prisoners were working without hot water, without medicine, in conditions designed, in her words, to erase identity and teach nothing but obedience. That's the goal, break you down completely. After that viral video of the punk prayer performance in Moscow's Cathedral of Christ the Savior back in 2012, the paper notes Alyokina spent more than a year behind bars. Later, she was pursued for supporting Navalny and criticizing the war in Ukraine. Now, this 37-year-old activist is living in exile in Berlin. Her 18-year-old son is in Iceland, and she's been sentenced in absentia to 13 years for criticizing the invasion. She's written a book called Political, describing life for dissidents in what she calls a police state, and she's calling on the West to defend democratic values through sanctions and support for Ukraine. Now, I read this article with interest, and I kept wondering, why is the newspaper giving this so much space? What's the angle here? And then I got to the end of the article, and suddenly everything made sense. There it was. The book is on sale for £25. This is a promotional piece. Maria Alyukina's book, Political, A Girl's Life and Fate in Russia, now available for £25 sterling. Look, I'm not saying her story isn't real or important, but let's be clear about what we're reading. This is marketing dressed up as journalism. That's the business model now. Political suffering as a product. £25 gets you the story. Easy money on a political theme. And before we go further, let me just remind you, if you're finding value in this kind of breakdown, where we don't just read you the news, but show you what's actually happening behind it, that like button is right there. Hit it, subscribe if you haven't, and drop a comment below. Tell me what you think about any of this. Your voice matters here. Let's keep building this community together. Now back to the UK domestic front, and this one's heavy. An independent investigation has uncovered systematic targeting and discriminatory practices based on race within London's Metropolitan Police. This isn't speculation anymore. This is documented. The report, prepared by Dr. Shireen Daniels, concluded that discrimination against black individuals is built into the structural design of the organization itself. What does that mean in practice? Black personnel are frequently labeled as confrontational, while lighter-skinned officers get more protection and more sympathy from the system. The research drew on evidence spanning more than 40 years, documenting how this has affected both the police relationship with the black community and how it's impacted black officers working inside the force. In society at large, people with darker skin are more often perceived as suspicious or aggressive, and force gets applied to them more readily. The report also identified something called adultification of black children. What's that? It's when the vulnerability of black kids gets downplayed and their actions get criminalized instead of being seen as normal childhood behavior. A black kid acting out in school gets treated like a criminal. A white kid doing the same thing gets treated like a kid having a bad day. This is the third major report on discrimination in UK policing. 3 times they've looked at this. 3 times they've found the same problems. And here's the absurdity the report highlighted. If a black person is driving a nice car, that doesn't mean they stole it. But that's the assumption baked into the system. That's what officers are trained, consciously or not, to suspect first. And the cycle continues. Now let's talk about another crisis that's eating Britain from the inside. Obesity. It's reached epidemic proportions, and it's costing every single taxpayer £7,000 a year. Let me put that in perspective. £268 billion annually goes toward treating conditions related to excess weight. That's not a typo. Billions with a B. 1 in every 10 5-year-olds and nearly a quarter of 10-year-olds are already carrying excess weight. And by 2040, if current trends hold, more than 21 million British adults will be dealing with obesity-related health problems. The government talks about this issue constantly. They love talking about it. But what are they actually doing? Half measures, weak responses. They're limiting advertising for unhealthy food on one hand, then handing out weight loss drugs on the other. It's treating symptoms while ignoring the disease. What's the real solution here? It's not complicated. Healthy food, movement, weight management, the fundamentals. But instead of addressing the core problem, which is a food system designed to make people sick and corporations rich, they're tinkering around the edges. Some people are calling for a radical overhaul. Tax unhealthy food heavily, then use that revenue to subsidize British organic products so families can actually afford to eat properly. Make the right choice, the easy choice, the affordable choice. Because here's what happens if they don't act. By 2030, Britain will be the heaviest country in Europe. Not heavy with migrants, heavy with actual physical weight. And treating all the diseases that come with that, diabetes, heart disease, joint problems, all of it, is going to bankrupt the National Health Service. The NHS is already on life support. This will finish it off. And you know what I was thinking while I was reading this article and looking at the photos of fried food and sweets? I was remembering how much I'd love to grab a proper meat pie from a corner shop for 22 cents like back in the day. Simple food, real food, before everything became processed garbage designed by food scientists to be as addictive as possible. An opinion writer in the newspaper, a 68-year-old representative of the baby boomer generation. I guess I'm somewhere in that generation myself, is tearing apart the myth that everyone her age is living comfortably. She's describing a sharp divide within the boomer generation in Britain. Some of her friends are being forced to sell their homes and cars just to make ends meet. Others are enjoying cruises and carefree retirements without a financial worry in the world. According to the Joseph Rowntree Foundation, approximately 2 million British retirees are living below the poverty line. And who gets hit the hardest? Those who don't own property or have modest savings. Many continue working well into old age, not because they want to, but because they have no choice. And they face age discrimination when trying to find employment, while simultaneously supporting adult children and elderly parents at the same time. They're squeezed from both sides. What's fascinating is that the newspaper raised this issue, and then Metro ran a piece about elderly people as well, noting that old folks renting out rooms in their homes isn't solving the housing shortage. It's a symptom of it. Get this. In the UK, 9 out of 10 homeowners over 65 live alone or with just a spouse, sitting on, according to the paper, 10 million spare bedrooms in houses they've lived in for an average of 26 years. Instead of downsizing to smaller homes, pensioners are renting out these rooms and pulling in up to £7,500 a year tax-free, thanks to the Rent-a-Room Relief Programme that started in 1992. Here's the paradox. The government is incentivizing wealthy elderly people to stay in large houses, while young families can't afford 3-bedroom apartments, which are the most in-demand housing type right now. So what are we supposed to do with this old British tradition? Keep letting people rent out rooms to anyone willing to pay astronomical prices? There's no clear answer being offered, just a system that's eating itself from the inside, while politicians make speeches about housing policy. UK Chancellor Rachel Reeves is considering a tax on electric vehicles of 3 pence for every mile driven, which would cost owners roughly £2,150 a year, starting in 2028 if this plan goes through. Why? Because the government is losing revenue from fuel taxes as the country moves away from internal combustion engines. They're expecting to lose around £24.5 billion annually, and that loss is complete by 2030 when the transition is supposed to be finished. Here's the part that'll make you laugh or maybe cry. They're going to charge you in advance for the miles they assume you're going to drive. You pay up front, then maybe get a refund later after recalculation, or maybe you'll owe more. I got curious about what this actually means in practical terms, so I did the math. 3,300 miles, that's what £250 covers. That's almost 1.5 times around the entire coastline of England in a year. And for that, you're paying an extra £250 on top of everything else you're already spending on your electric car. Assuming, of course, you can actually drive that far without needing to charge. If you're not driving, maybe you're flying. British Airways just announced they're installing Starlink satellite internet on their aircraft starting in 2026 as part of a £7 billion transformation. The parent company, International Airlines Group, signed a deal with Starlink to connect internet to more than 500 aircraft across their carriers. Passengers will get free high-speed Wi-Fi in all cabin classes with no login required, meaning you can stream videos and movies while you're in the air. British Airways CEO emphasized this will especially set them apart from competitors on short-haul routes, giving customers fast internet from the moment they board until touchdown. Now let's get into some criminal news, and I need to warn you, if you're sensitive to this kind of content, you might want to skip ahead. 7 men from feuding Turkish families who own kebab shops in Newport, Wales, were sentenced to prison time for a street brawl that happened back in August. This incident went down on Commercial Road in broad daylight in front of shocked shoppers when members of the Aksoy and Sayak families attacked each other with metal poles, wooden sticks from the kebab stands, and canes. The fight started when Ferhat Sayak struck Mahmed Aksoy, and then other family members who live in the same area rushed to the scene and joined in the violence. The judge called it a disgraceful outbreak of violence and disorder, noting that it doesn't reflect the values of the Kurdish and Turkish communities. On average, participants got about 1.5 years in prison each, plus fines. The hostility between these families apparently stems from conflicts between their members back in Turkey. How exactly their members got into it isn't specified in the reports. Finally, authorities arrested a mistakenly released prisoner who had been walking free for a week. Brahim Kadura Sherif, the one on the left in the photos, a 24-year-old Algerian national, was detained in the Finsbury Park area of North London on November 7th after a member of the public spotted him. This all happened after, remember, they released another guy by mistake. He tried to turn himself back in. They wouldn't let him in at first. Then police spent 3 days looking for him before arresting him. Now they've lost 2 others. Released them by accident, can't find them. A week passed. They finally arrested this Kadora sheriff guy who was accidentally freed from Wormwood Prison on October 29th, but police only learned about the error on November 4th. He'd previously served punishment for burglary and had been convicted for indecent behavior. His arrest came after another mistakenly released prisoner, Billy Smith, voluntarily surrendered to authorities. They let him out, he realized something was wrong, and he turned himself in on his own. According to government data, in the year up to March 2025, 262 prisoners were mistakenly released. That's a 128% increase compared to the year before. Let me break that down. If it's 128% more, that means the previous year they released about 100 people by accident. This year, it's 262. Police are looking for them, can't find them. This is the system we're trusting with public safety. Here's a lighter bit of criminal news, though still absurd. A 24-year-old cashier at the Genting Casino in Westfield Stratford City Shopping Centre in East London, Juliana Quintero Velas, stole £10,000 thinking the cameras couldn't see her. Video footage showed her supposedly discreetly pulling banknotes from the cash drawer, covering the money with documents, and walking out of the office with the cash tucked under her jacket. Police got information about her plans to leave the country and arrested her at home less than 24 hours after the theft on June 14th. Velas admitted to the theft and was sentenced to 120 hours of community service and ordered to pay £200 in compensation. Her license to work in the gaming industry has been suspended. Now here's a truly ridiculous story about flags. The owner of the Moonrakers pub in Pewsey, Wiltshire, Jerry Clankler, is under investigation by the Municipal Council after a complaint about the enormous red St. George's cross he painted on the white walls of his establishment. Clankler first painted this cross back in 2016 during the European Football Championship, then refreshed it in 2022 for the World Cup. An anonymous town resident filed a complaint claiming the pub reminds them of a National Front headquarters. Clankler, who happens to be the longest-serving councillor in Wiltshire, objects, saying he's always run a family pub and uses the cross as a symbol of support for the England national football team, not for political reasons. The Wiltshire Council noted that the building is listed as historically significant and located in a protected zone, so any changes to its exterior appearance require special permission. Now the situation will be investigated in accordance with council policy. A flag supporting the national football team is being investigated as potentially extremist. That's where we are now. And listen, we're deep into this now, but I want to take a moment. If you're still with me, if you're getting something out of this kind of analysis that doesn't treat you like you're stupid, I need you to do something. Leave a comment. Tell me which story hit you the hardest and why you think the system refuses to change. Engage with this community. We're building something real here, and your voice is part of it. Let me bring this all together for you before we wrap. We started with a German general warning that Russia could strike NATO territories as soon as tomorrow if they choose to, with plans to expand to 1.5 million soldiers. The Kremlin is denying rifts between Putin and Lavrov, while Hungary is trying to break sanctions unity. A Pussy Riot activist is selling her story of prison conditions for £25 a book. London's Metropolitan Police has been found to have systematic discrimination built into its structure, targeting people based on skin colour for the 3rd time this has been documented. Britain's obesity epidemic is costing taxpayers billions and will bankrupt the NHS if nothing real changes. Millions of retirees are living in poverty while others cruise comfortably, and the government is incentivizing wealthy seniors to hoard large homes while young families can't find housing. They're planning to tax electric vehicles by the mile while mistakenly releasing hundreds of prisoners they can't find. A casino worker thought she could steal £10,000 on camera. Turkish families are brawling with kebab shop equipment in the streets, and someone's investigating a pub owner for painting his national flag on his own building. This is the system. This is what it looks like when institutions lose their way, when nobody's actually solving problems, just managing optics and collecting revenue. So here's what I want you to take away from all of this. The world isn't stable. The systems we're told to trust are breaking down in real time, from international security to domestic policing to basic public health. And the people in charge are either unable or unwilling to address root causes. They treat symptoms, they shuffle papers, they issue reports, and nothing fundamentally changes. But here's the thing. You're informed now. You see what's happening. You're not relying on sanitized corporate news that tells you everything's fine when it clearly isn't. And that makes you dangerous to a system that relies on ignorance and compliance. Stay informed, stay alert, stay engaged. If this kind of content matters to you, if you want to see more of it, hit that like button right now. Subscribe to this channel if you haven't already. And if you really want to support independent journalism that doesn't answer to corporate masters or government pressure, consider becoming a channel sponsor. It's how we keep this going. It's how we keep digging deeper when everyone else is looking away. It means everything to have you as part of this. I'll see you in the next one. Keep your eyes open. Remember, an informed person is a dangerous person to those who profit from your ignorance. Until next time.